Almost everything you call reality is a minority outcome of a much larger process. The universe is not mostly empty, it is mostly unselected. We are accustomed to thinking of reality as built from matter, stars burning, galaxies rotating, particles colliding, light traveling across space. We treat what interacts with light as a substance of existence, but everything that emits, reflects, or absorbs light accounts for only a small fraction of what is actually there. The overwhelming majority of the universe never stabilizes into visibility, not because it is hidden, not because it is waiting to be discovered, but because visibility itself is a rare condition. When most of reality does not interact with light, light cannot define what reality really is, which means what you experience is not the full structure of existence. Reality is not what exists, it is what survives. And once you see that, reality stops looking solid and starts looking selective. Galaxies rotate faster than visible matter allows. If gravity came only from the stars and gas we can measure, the outer regions should drift away. Over time, the spiral structure should unravel. It doesn't. Something unseen is holding them together. We observe the same anomaly when light passes near regions that appear empty. It bends, it distorts. It curves as though guided by mass that is not visible to us. Space behaves as if something is there, and this pattern is not isolated. It repeats across galaxies, across clusters, across billions of light years. When a discrepancy appears once, it can be dismissed, an outlier. But when it repeats at a cosmic scale, it becomes structural. Absence begins behaving like mass. If nothing were present, gravity would weaken, motion would scatter, systems would dissolve. They do not. Empty things don't do this, which means what dominates the universe is not empty, it simply does not appear. If unseen structure outweighs the visible, then visibility is no longer the foundation of reality, it is a conditional outcome. Light interacts within a narrow band of wavelengths. Matter forms only under specific temperatures, pressures, and force balances. Atoms bind within defined thresholds. Stars ignite within defined ranges. What we call visible exists under constraint. Darkness does not share those limits. It surrounds galaxies. It shapes clusters. It outweighs luminous matter at every scale we can measure. By proportion alone, it dominates. When something dominates that completely, it cannot be treated as secondary. The visible universe is not the base layer of existence. It is the residue of selection. Matter did not build from nothing. Matter survived narrowing. It passed through constraint while most configurations did not. The majority never stabilized into interaction. It remains part of the structure. It simply never became experience. And once that inversion settles, the next question becomes unavoidable. What or who decides what gets through? Before moving forward, notice something simple. The universe does not merely operate, it stabilizes. Oscillations repeat, fields fluctuate, particles vibrate within defined ranges. Structures persist only when their internal tensions resolve into coherence. In that sense, the universe resonates. Not metaphorically, physically. Every stable structure is the result of rhythm settling into pattern. In that sense, the universe sings. Not as sound, but as repetition held long enough to endure. We walk because gravity remains stable beneath us. We speak because air carries oscillation. We think because neural activity maintains continuity long enough to form identity. We dance because the floor holds. We think because coherence persists. Consciousness is not separate from this process. It is what happens when coherence lasts long enough to recognize itself. Experience feels solid, not because reality is simple, but because instability has already been filtered out. At its foundation, reality does not begin singular, it begins crowded. Before structure stabilizes, multiple configurations coexist, unstable, overlapping, provisional. Every outcome is possible, none is secured. But instability cannot persist. If all configurations remained equally present, structure would dissolve into noise. No pattern would endure long enough to interact. Nothing would accumulate. Because structure exists, narrowing must occur. Collapse is not preference, it is pressure. As conditions tighten, temperature, density, force, only certain arrangements remain coherent. Everything else loses the capacity to stabilize. Collapse does not choose what is true, it selects what can survive the pressure of existence. Truth is optional, stability is not. Most probabilities are not wrong, they are incompatible. And incompatibility does not linger, it fails to stabilize. What appears is not what exists most, it is what endured long enough to matter. The majority never crossed the threshold into interaction. Most possibilities never mattered long enough to be noticed. Reality is not what exists, it is what survives. When a configuration fails to stabilize, it does not vanish. It stops interacting. That distinction matters. The unselected majority does not disappear. It remains embedded in the gravitational architecture of the universe, influencing without illuminating. Dark matter is not empty space. It is structure that never collapsed into visibility, yet still exerts force. It does not emit light. It does not absorb light. It does not scatter light, but it pulls. It binds galaxies together long after luminous matter would have disappeared. The unselected still shapes the selected, and narrowing has consequences. Every act of collapse reduces possibility. Every reduction generates imbalance. Every imbalance creates pressure. Pressure does not remain contained, it redistributes. The universe expands not because it exploded, but because exclusion accumulates. As coherence forms in one region, what cannot stabilize is displaced outward. Space stretches as unresolved configurations are pushed beyond the boundary of stability. Expansion is recoil, not chaos, but redistribution. And time is not merely duration. It is the measure of how long coherence persists before narrowing again. The longer a structure survives, the more influence it accumulates. The more influence it accumulates, the more future configurations must align with it. Stability compounds. Earth is not simply billions of years old, it is billions of years into remaining stable. For that long, gravitational balances have held, chemical bonds have persisted, stellar output has remained within narrow tolerances, orbital dynamics have not unraveled. That is not guaranteed, it is accumulated stability. Awareness, from what we know, does not appear early in a universe like this, it appears late. Only after coherence has persisted long enough to sustain continuity does structure become capable of recognizing itself. Consciousness is not separate from this process. It is what happens when stability becomes self-referential. And collapse is not only cosmic, it happens locally, constantly. Attention narrows possibility, perception filters instability, experience reinforces what fits within the structure already formed. Most of reality never becomes visible. Most possibilities never mattered long enough to be noticed, but what does appear matters, precisely because it is rare. The universe you experience is not the whole of what exists. It is the surface that survived. The universe is not finished, it is still narrowing. And where coherence stabilizes, reality follows. The veil is not hiding reality from you, it is participating with you.